So I'm pleasantly surprised with how many people are showing up for this piece. Each year, I put in some lectures that I pretty much know are going to fly, and I usually put one random one in there that I'm not quite sure how it's going to be received. So it's really nice to see a lot of people here. And I'm hoping you actually know what you've signed up for this particular lecture when I actually start lecturing. So what's happened over the last probably 15 to 20 years, horses have truly become the teachers with people. And if you begin to look at it, they've moved from maybe farming, transportation, war, and supporting individuals into recreation. And most recently, they've truly moved into healing. And we look at the different healing programs from therapeutic riding, been around for decades, all the way through to equine facilitated learning, equine assisted learning, and you're beginning to see them helping young people through bulimia and anorexia, all the way through to children that have been trafficked, women that have been abused, men, women suffering from PTSD. And we've seen the horses move forward. We've seen them facilitate healing. It's huge. You see it in the Reiki classes where you're offering Reiki and they receive, they give back. And you've seen it in healing, and if you're on the internet, you see it all the time, where the horses will offer energy healing. Or indeed, it can be as simple as somebody interacting with the horse alone. We have Denver being our inner city, and there's many locations outside of Denver where the children are welcome, that they come out and maybe they've never seen cattle or they've never seen horses. And the mere fact that they step onto the country land and they're surrounded by horses, that can facilitate healing. So when we look at horses as our teachers, as our coaches, as our healers, the level of participation varies greatly, from them interacting where that child sees them, grooms them, and they get their healing, all the way through to people facilitating exercises. The exercises could be set up where there's an obstacle course at Liberty, and you've seen team building and leadership too. There's no better species in my experience, and I see many, I'm not simply a horse whisperer, I see a lot of them, than horses. Dogs, phenomenal. Take them into hospitals, take them with the veterans, fantastic for the veterans to get grounded and to learn that loyalty and find the unconditional love, absolutely unquestionable. But there's something about a horse being a 1,400-pound animal that changes things versus a dog. And I'm fortunate that I travel the world. Very lucky to do that. One of the things I did years ago was to decide that I wanted my passion to pay. And it was years ago when I was in the police that I traveled to Jamaica, actually, and it was my trigger. And my trigger was that I went home and went, why do I have to spend 360 days of the year actually in Grey England and being abused left, right, and center? Why couldn't I live in the Caribbean? And I made my decision then that I'd make a shift, that every morning I wanted to wake up happy, and every morning I wanted to live my passion. I moved to California, and I became a horse whisperer, and that was the change of my life. I gave up everything. More than most people could ever imagine. I gave up a husband, a horse, a home. I gave up a career, and I lived out of a suitcase for years. That meant I didn't own anything above what the suitcase could handle. And I never knew if I could settle here, and within years of getting the green card, I certainly settled. But it was to find the horses. I dedicated my life, because I then had nothing else, to learn the language of the horse. So I watched those horses day in, day out, 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, to learn that language, to realize that it went beyond the spoken, to realize that it was body language, that they would seek your authenticity. And what they'd seek would be your real, the real you. So when you learn horsemanship, and horsemanship existed before equine facilitated learning did. So the true horsemanship piece is you're looking for your authenticity. And for you to understand that, when we teach you horsemanship and horse whispering, you're looking at who you truly are. So the horses bring out the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that would mean if you saw my demo today and you saw the one with Aria, you can imagine if somebody had an ego working her, she was a little complicated and she was out of her comfort zone. She was difficult to handle, so certainly not a finished horse. You come in there with that ego because you've got an audience of 100 people watching. The only place is failure at that point. But you come in realizing that this 4-year-old mare's giving her best and you're here to support her. Your whole way of thinking is different. She's going to press buttons by the mere fact that she can't handle that situation as effectively as we would want her to. And what that would mean is if you're on the ends of those long lines and you don't have the ability to handle her, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to get hurt. You're going to think it's personal. And you could either end up getting firmer and harder because you run out of tools, or you could lose it, drop the lines, and give up. So what horses do is they bring out the true nature of who you are. So a good horseman will look inside. They will look at who they are. What happens when I run out of tools? How do I handle it? What happens if you've got a horse that pokes you, literally looks for your failures or what your weaknesses? How do you handle them? What if you've got one that's nervous and you're nervous too? They're going to bring out that nervousness. You're going to jump when they jump, etc. So horses will always mirror who you are. And this is the glory to take it to healing. I was fortunate last year to be invited to North Carolina to help with some veterans. It's been my dream. And the whole idea when I started this 20 years ago, I took a year's sabbatical from the police force to take it back to the police. In effect, I was before my time. I took the year off. I was a serving police officer, and I intended to learn horse whispering to improve the bedside manner of our policemen. They're pretty good in the UK. They don't have weapons. They communicate. But at the same time, because we're all so busy, people were numbers. And there's nothing worse than being a victim and feeling like a number. It's not a fun thing because you're moving on to the next piece. So I felt the horses could teach the policemen better communication. It was too early. It didn't exist. It was simply too early. Fast forward 18 years, my dream's coming true. And so I was in North Carolina. The way it was designed, we had veterans from Vietnam, veterans from Afghanistan. We had serving dog handlers. We had women, we had men, and we had lower ranking, if you want higher ranking. So it was a whole mix of individuals. I think on hindsight, that organization would switch that a little bit. My concern with that was, what if these women had been sexually abused and they're here with the men? What if? Because there's an awful lot of that happening in those war zones. So there was an awful lot of different people there. Move that to one side. I did a ton of research on it. It was very, very important to me that we did this right. More than one veteran a day is committing suicide. And so therefore, I felt that there was an awful lot of responsibility on my shoulders to teach them something great. Having been a serving police officer, I also felt that I had some knowledge to bring to the table because I've been there on the forefront of things. Not like them, but in my own way. Combine that with the horses, I set up a program. The 3 days there, I had an older gentleman come up to me. He'd been to Vietnam, and he said, I've learned more in 3 days than I have in 30 years in therapy. I'm going back to New York a different man. Huge. It's the horses, but it's also the facilitator. All too many times, all of my students are wonderfully trained. There go, the horses are our teachers, correct, and the facilitator. Because if I put you as a Mustang and let you try and gentle them, you're going to be there for years. You need a good facilitator as well as the horse to be able to do it. So it's highly important as to who you choose when you go with that training program. When I was with the veterans, a lot of them had cell phones, as do students and as do you. I wanted to be able to say, here's a basket, put them in this basket while you're on my course. But I was there as a horse coach, and I was not there as the therapist. We didn't do that. Many of them got a little distracted from heat and other means. And we kept the clinic quite mellow the first day because I'd been asked not to trigger anybody. So I did that. We did the Liberty course, and if you've seen it, if you've seen me work that, it's phenomenal, because if a horse is at liberty and the human's there, you are now naked. You're stripped, because you are not on the end of a line controlling a horse. You can only influence the horse. because that's all you can do through communication. It's awesome. It shows the true being. They're naked. So the first day, here we are, show me what you have, who you are. Now we can build on what we have. On the second day, they felt so comfortable in the course, they got more distracted. I, on the other hand, didn't like that. I thought, okay, they're distracted. We're going to up this game. And I made some phone calls and I said, don't trigger these boys, these men. I went back and I went, you think this is easy? Spook busting these horses? I'm going to find you 2-year-old horses. So I found the 2-year-old colts and went, now let's work. Let's put you in with a horse that if you bring up the flight or the fight, we've got reactions. We're trying not to bring up flight or fight with you. You're not allowed to bring it up with these horses. I had a Marine touch me and literally say, I'm too frightened to go in with 1,400-pound horses. I've never in my career as a horsewoman had anybody say that. I've never had men come up and say, I'm too frightened. I had servicemen come up and I thought, that's interesting. Maybe they've been trained to say that, to voice it. I wasn't sure. I went in with him. We did it together. We started with grooming. We went on with spook busting. He nailed it. He came out, and at the end of that session, he basically came back with, I never thought I could do that. It's huge. My whole reason for being there was to reconnect them with being at home. My ex-husband was in 1st Armored Field Ambulance and went to Desert Storm. The whole unit ended up in divorce, except he and I at the time. It's common. The whole thing was the women were saying the marriage hasn't got a connection, and the men were finding, in those days it was more men over there, the men were finding it hard to settle. The horses can bring out the emotion. They can allow them to feel again. And the horses can bring out the best to allow them to connect and not fake it. They can't just go up to a horse and go, here you are, it's all good. The horse is expecting the connection. They're going to learn to be in the present time and not out here. They're going to learn to ground themselves. They're going to learn to reconnect. There's no other species, in my opinion, that can do that. So as I'm teaching this, I've also been fortunate to go to therapeutic riding barns throughout the United States, from High Hopes, Pegasus, Hidden Acres, and Ray of Light. These are just a few. Zuma's Rescue Ranch would be another one, and we could continue. And I come in as the equine expert. And that may be that we're looking to match the horses. So the fortunate thing, I'm not just in one location, I see a lot. And it may be that somebody will have an idea that we take ex-race horses to match them with young women. Pros and cons with that. 2-year-old race horse doesn't really know left, right, slow and stop, and could run over the top of you. Could be a great match, could be a challenging match. So it depends on what you're looking at as to who you match them with. You'll see Mustangs being matched with veterans. Hardest thing you'll do is actually gentle and Mustang. So you're putting a raw veteran with a raw Mustang. If it's successful, it will be highly successful. High risk, huge high risk, because you've got a wild animal with somebody that could be unpredictable. High risk, high result. So you start looking at who would you bring in horse-wise. Do we bring in the young horses? Do we bring in the abused horses? Do we bring in the untouched horses? Do we bring in the schoolmasters? I'm not going to give you the answer on it. I just want you to think about that process, because you'll hear some people say, don't bring in the rescue horses because they've got baggage themselves. But on other times, they can understand you. I introduced Aria this morning as a Premarin. She holds a degree of baggage, not a truckload of baggage. But there's some Premarin mares that will hold a ton of baggage, and maybe they can understand a female that's lost their child. Maybe because they've been through it, they'll have that empathy. So you could look at those horses to say, which one matches what we're doing with our equine facilitated learning? Which one's the best match you could give back? As an animal communicator, and that may stretch you somewhat, I'm not sure, the animal communication allows me to go straight to the individual and ask their viewpoint. I can tell you this, in my whole career, 35 years now, I find that EFL, Equine Facilitated Learning, and any therapy is the hardest job a horse will ever do. You could arguably say that a horse in service, like the police, is hard, and it is because there's stress involved. But I can tell you from my experience that the horses don't know what they're walking into with therapy. I can assess horses through round penning, get the personality, the history, and their desires through the round pen experience. The one job we can't assess them for is therapy, because they don't know what they're walking into. They don't actually know what it means. Now, you could also say, let's look at the performance horses, and many people donate their performance horses to these therapy programs because they say, I don't want them to retire, or they're not ready to retire. Many performance horses find it difficult to adjust. They've gone from having a personal groom to being in an adoptive situation. They've gone from loving their person and serving their person to being discarded. Not all performance horses like it, and they get vices. Not all are set up for it. It's the hardest job you'll ever give them. And if we look at the therapeutic riding, think of it this way, and I'm going to elaborate on this in a minute. It's the most rewarding for people, for sure, and there will be many horses that love it because they can give back. But think of this situation or scenario for a minute. If we've got them for therapy and we're looking at a Down syndrome child or autistic child, we have the child riding, we have sidewalkers, and we have a leader, and we have an instructor. These horses are flight animals. We've taken away the flight. These horses communicate non-verbally. That means they're listening to energy. There's some children whose energy is very dispersed and very sporadic and unpredictable. They're listening to body language. Where are your eyes? They're listening to feel. They have to discard all of that. It goes out the window. They cannot listen to the seat of the rider anymore because they're not allowed to follow it. They're not listening to the instructor, really, because they've got to see what's for them or the child. They're not listening to the sidewalkers because they're holding the child up. They have to become somewhat numb. And then you question, why aren't they moving forward? Because they've had to ignore 5 different people. It's a hard lesson to do. When you find that gem of a horse, hold on to them. Hold on to that horse, because that's the horse that's giving unconditionally, saying, despite all these messages, I can do this anyway. It's huge to realize. As you walk into these careers, if you're already doing this, we begin to look at assessing the horse, and I've shared that with you. But also think of the people, or you, where you look at this career as a career change. Many women in the 40s look for this career change. And they'll go on the coaching course, and they'll learn the gestalt, or the coaching, or the therapy. Are they horsemen and women? Now, you could arguably say you don't need it, but you could also arguably say, would it not be better if you understood a horse? Because you're interpreting the language. If you're now looking at mirroring, you're interpreting that horse licking the salt block, saying, is there anybody here needing salt? What if that horse simply needs salt at that time and it's not an interpretation? You may hear people say, in the presence of this female, all the horses are dropping. I've heard coaches say, is there a sexual issue going on? There could be, but what if one horse has dropped and the others need to pee? They've been holding on to it, and you don't know how to read it. It's really, really important to understand that the language of the horse comes in here. We need to know the language to understand if his ears are pinned versus his ears back to listen. Are they back because they're listening, or are they pinned? We need to know if the eye is glazed because they've checked out versus an eye that is soft. We need to know if they're licking and chewing or they have a teeth issue. We need to know if they're blocking that rider with the head carriage. Is that the bad saddle fit? Or is there something about that rider that doesn't suit? We need to know if they have the right nutrition for the job, correct magnesium, if they're mares. We need to know if they are colicking, if we've got enough of the supplements, i.e. calcium in there, with barometric pressure changes. You need to know that. So we begin to break this down and realize that the language of the horse is imperative for a happy horse. Because the question then comes back to, are we partnering with them or are we using them? Partnering would mean we understand the language of the horse so we can interpret and meet them. But it goes beyond that. We look at the training then. Are we training them sufficiently? And are we training them now in a way that's kind so that they can take that person on the back? So kind for me, in fact, would be bitless. Because if I've got a rider on that horse's back, they shouldn't be in the horse's mouth. It would not be partnering if that rider who cannot ride has access to the horse's mouth. That's not partnering. They should only be on a halter so that they're not giving conflicting messages. So as a partner, you would say, my partner who's a horse has the toughest job on this planet. How can I make it most comfortable for them? So we look at the tack. I went to one place actually here in Colorado, a therapeutic riding barn, and none of the tack fitted. 0 tack fitting. So now we're not just putting a person up. A person would mean, I'm going to go with your all riders, you're not sitting on the horse, you're riding the horse, you're an active participant. People that have disabilities cannot necessarily be active participants. They may be known as what's called dead weight. Put a dead weight on a horse with a saddle that doesn't fit, it's like you guys wearing shoes that don't fit or a belt that's too tight. You would get the saddle to fit, because it's imperative that if they have 2 to 3 lessons a day, that saddle fits and isn't substituted with a saddle pad. So the saddle has to fit. So we begin to look at not just the language of the horse for the interpretation, we also look at the training to say, should we go bitless for the training? And how does this look with the halter? I'm a fan of the dually halter, you've seen that. And it's kind of nice because we could ground drive off of it or we could ride off of it. So it's a nice way to implement it. You guys could go with side pulls, you could go with bitless bridles, anything that wouldn't interfere with the horse's mouth. You could even look at bareback, you can look at the surcingle, things that are comfortable for them. And the training might include the fact that that horse needs a competent rider to ride. It's one of the things they seek. So if they're giving, let's say, 3-4 lessons a week, maybe they want to go out on the trail and have fun. And it's a release for them, that they have to over-focus for 3 days a week where they're not allowed to put a foot wrong because it's dangerous. And you say, you know what, I know we have this relationship and connection, I'll ride you for 2 days a week so that you have the fun. And you're not putting them in a frame when you ride. So you're not going out going, okay, now you have to hold still and just do what I say. You go, here's the reins. Where are we going to go today? You give them that freedom on the riding. So the training can expand from in hand so that they understand. And last year I was invited to 2 therapeutic riding barns where the biggest complaint is the horses are further back. They're not leading correctly. It can take a 5-10 minute piece to teach a horse to lead with the nose to shoulder if you need to. And the key there is to get every volunteer on the same page. So everybody's doing the same thing. Because if each volunteer knows how to get a horse to release from pressure, we won't have that problem. If they're dragging the horses, they're going to drag them forevermore because they don't know how to get the horse to step up. So if we put the volunteer class in there, we change everything for the horses. I remember at one particular barn, one of the complaints some of the horses had would be that they'd have too many handlers. That meant that somebody went and caught them, somebody was grooming them, somebody was sidewalking. It was a system they'd created. No consistency for the horse. We might not think of it like that. We could look at it for ease for us to go, okay, we just need these groups to do it this way, but the horses didn't get the consistency. And it may not be that you have to do it for all of the horses. It may be that you look at these individual personalities to say, you know what, Cookie loves this handler. Let's just make sure that they say hi in that paddock, she gets to groom him, and she becomes the primary walker because they get on really well. We begin to take notice of it, to see what their likes are and the dislikes are, so that we could adjust this somewhat. Depending on your beliefs and where you go with it, there's many ways to give back to these horses. There's the energetic piece, and I've just given a lecture on Reiki, which is really, really neat to realize that the Reiki or energy healing can give back on an emotional, mental, physical, spiritual level. So depending on your beliefs, you could look at that. Now let's take a step back for a minute. We look at how powerful these horses are in healing, often more powerful than therapists. And we can put people in, be it the round pen or the arena or the paddock, and miracles happen. Undeniable miracles. You'll see it in that moment. There will be horses that will give unconditionally, and there's horses that can handle this. That you could say, here's another individual with PTSD. Are you ready? But there will be also horses that are dumped on, in effect. Then in fact, they take that energy and they hold it. They can't get rid of it. And you'll see change in their behavior and physical change. And you've got to be mindful of that. So in turn, if they are helping healing energetically, are we helping them heal afterwards? And that would mean that you might look at a clearing. So Reiki comes in really handy there, that you go, let's do an energetic clearing. It may be that you have crystals in your barn. And I'm certainly not an expert there, but realize this, when I interviewed Secretariat's family when I used to have a radio station, she said, little did you know that Secretariat had crystals in his stall. So this isn't that woo-woo and weird to think that racehorses don't have it either. You could say, we'll have some crystals for that horse to support him. You could put it in his stall, in the barn. It just depends on where you are in your career and in your life. So you could look at the Reiki clearing, you could look at the crystal clearing. You also want to consider, when we give back on that front, as to where we conduct these sessions. Through animal communication, I've had a lot of feedback here, more than I could give you as a horsewoman. For a horsewoman, I can give you techniques in training. I can give you techniques to do the behavior modification, look at pain in the body, look at nutrition and so on. But it's the animal communication that you can truly ask them. And here was a story that I had. And this has happened a lot, by the way, where people like you will call in and ask the horses, how do they feel about the therapy in the business? I had this one horse show in pictures, so bear with me with the story, that the woman would have her clients come into the paddock. And I thought, that's a really cool story. You know, you're not going to the round pen, you're not setting up exercises, really, really neat. We did 2 or 3 sessions that day. And this one horse was showing that the people would come in the paddock and he would show the trees in the area it was happening, and healing was happening. Totally happy with it. We connected with a second horse, and his response was different. He came back with, this is my home. You're bringing people with problems into my home. I help them and support them, and I'm left with that energy under my favorite place with these trees. I can't get rid of it. You're basically bringing in negative energy to our favorite place. Me as a horsewoman, I'm going, oh, this is a really cool thing. She's got it made. She's not doing exercises. Good job, thumbs up. Horse had a different perspective. That horse felt that we're invading the paddock. I had never even thought of that. And now, as a horsewoman, I look at it differently. So if you came to me, I'd go, great idea, take them in the paddock. Now I'd step back a moment and go, how do your horses feel about that? When you step in the paddock, are they walking away? Are they walking to you? When you step out of the paddock, are they happy or are they lethargic? Look at how they feel about your business proposal. Does it suit them? So it doesn't take an animal communicator to do that. It truly takes observation. Don't just put them back in the paddock, turn the great session, high five to us, and that person's healed, good job. You're looking back to go, how was that for you? And so often we venture into a passion where we want to be with the horses, and sometimes it gets financially driven. And you begin to look at the numbers. I've been to many, many therapeutic riding barns where they'd be proud to say we're having between 200 and 400 lessons a week. 400 lessons with 28 head of horses. We have 14 staff on the payroll and 400 lessons for 28 horses. Is it now a machine? And it's only a question. Or is it a partnership? If we have a ton of vices, i.e. wind sucking, wood chewing, bellyache, colics, glazed eyes, we're missing the partnership. The horses are burnt out. We have happy horses that step forward and go, what is it I can do for you today? You're doing great. And that's exactly what the partnership means. You begin to look at that, because as horse women and men, we're going to look at these guys and say, I know this horse, she's a lead mare, she somewhat withholds herself, great observer, she'd be perfect for this guy or this woman. And you're leading her out despite the fact she left, because she's a perfect match. Is that a partnership? Just keep asking. There's not an answer, because there's times, rightfully so, where you might say, I have to get out of bed anyway and go to work anyway, and that's their job. Their job is to do this, and they have to do it anyway. Here's the difference. The cattleman, his horse has to do it anyway, in the snow. He has to get out there 100,000 acres, they have to check for the calves, and that horse better cowboy up, because that's his job. You're moving into healing, where you're saying, can you help heal the heart? You don't just yank on the lead rope and go, you've got to do it anyway. It's a different game, it's a different role. You can't drag them in the arena and go, now get on with it. It's esoteric, it's healing, different job. We have to change our mindsets to that. So when we partner now, this is one job, and the main reason is it's non-profits, because there's not a lot of money in it. If we look at it from that standpoint for therapeutic, maybe PTSD, there's a lot of funding right now. But if we look at the therapy piece, it's a huge investment. You're looking at nutrition. You're looking at, hopefully, natural living, saddle fitting, natural dentistry, natural hoof care, hopefully as natural as possible. And why natural? Because you've got a lot of clinicians here. Why natural? Because you want that horse closest to natural as possible. That's why. Because you're going to avoid the vices and the pain and the sickness if they're close to natural. So living out is different than in a stall. Having nutrition available, different to them just selecting when needed. Having food available, pretty much free choice versus 2 feedings a day, that's how they live on the range. Allowing them the voice and the choice to step up and forward and say, I'd like to do the healing today, that's the partnership. Keeping them barefoot so that you can read that hoof and allow them not to have the shoes unless it's therapeutic and you really need it, okay? That's a good way to go. Saddle fitting, if you're putting riders up, absolutely. Look at the saddle. Don't take the 20-year-old saddle with a twist in the tree. You've got to realize that that's their backs. Now we move on to what else can we help them with? Horses were never designed to take a rider in the first place. So massage, chiropractic, you'll be investing in there too. Energy healing, crystals, oils, you'll be investing in that too. And you can suddenly see this long list of the free horse that was donated to your location. Suddenly, he's going to cost you quite a bit of money down the road if you partner. If you use him, not so much. If you just say he's part of that, and we're not worried about this list of things we need to do to make him comfy, won't cost you so much. But truly, if you want him to be a good partner, we're looking at bringing in those peers, because we're not masters at everything. So the chiropractor is fantastic for the adjustments. Massage, great, because it helps with the adjustments too. The oils. I brought some oils here today to show you. And I found great things with oils, and if you ever wanted to smell some, it's kind of neat, because not only would it help the people, but if we had, let's say, well, that's one of my favorite ones. Let's say if we had a horse who had problems adjusting, why not try Magnify Your Purpose? And if you guys want to smell it, you're welcome to. If we had a horse a little more lethargic and sad, why not try Joy? It's something that can support them in a little and yet a huge way, that you could say, let's put this in your stall, or if you're outside, you know, let's wear a little bit of Joy so you can take it if you need it. Because if they were grieving, there's oils that help with that. Transformation's a great oil. So you can bring it in to say, although you can't go back in your former life because that's not an option, let's help you transform into this life. Let's help this segue to realize that you're finding it hard, but the people you touch, you're saving their lives. So how can we help you move into that role? The oils help. So there's several things that you can integrate in there. If you're truly looking at it as from a business standpoint, you'll need a good board of directors. I'm going to skip that piece, but just realize you need a good backing of the board of directors. We've covered telepathy a little bit. We've covered energy. We've covered training. We've covered the language of the horse. And I've just mentioned the board, but not gone into detail with it. But by the end, from the beginning to the end of the lecture, we look at what is partnering versus what would be using the horses. And why is this important? Because we've all got equal parties in it, equal partnership. There were horses actually in Australia. A woman created a facility. And this was animal communication. And within that, the horse was coming back with, there's 3 pieces to our business plan. Believe it or not, they can do this. Okay, so she came back with, if I remember this right, 1 would be the person with the knowledge and the experience and the training. She came back with the land. I loved that piece. So the land is significant for the healing to take place. Choose the right land. And that would mean step onto this property, and if the land's right, everything else will fall into place. Or indeed, if the land's right, you don't even need the horses or the coach. So the land was huge. Something else I learned, because maybe as a horse whisperer, it's not the first thing I think of. I can go to any of these facilities and the land won't look right. But you just go, okay, it's working, let's go with it. The land, especially for healing, hugely important. So you may be looking at the history of the land. So has it been a war zone for Native Americans? Here's a story for you. I went to Eastern Germany last year, and as soon as I put my feet onto that turf, things went a little topsy-turvy. And I was teaching for a week, and it was a little gray outside anyway. My internet broke, so my lifeline to my family went. I had no Skype, and that's a big thing for me. And the students were late, and Germans are never late. They're on time. And I gave it 100%. Every day I got hold of Vin, and he said, you always do things 100%, do the best you can. So I was dragging myself out a bit, but as soon as that door opened, smiles and giving my best. And we did, and the horses did it, and the students loved it. And the turnout just wasn't there. The turnout wasn't there. I remember I was there for over a week, and I stayed put and did the best I could, but I wasn't uplifted and I wasn't refilled, which I often am in my horsemanship. And it was a lot of questions as to why, what's going on, and I thought I was supposed to be here. Clinic finished, and I'd been talking to actually the chef at this place and so on. And here's the punchline. The place at which I was teaching, the village at which we were at, was a women's concentration camp. I couldn't override it. I wouldn't think for 1 minute I could, but I couldn't override it. Every night and every morning I was drained. I couldn't get through it. So in effect, you're pushing uphill. There was some residue in the area. So the land was huge to realize, can you do it? We always think we're the ones. I've been on many properties where I've gone, okay, let's put the love and light in here. Let's bring the energy in here. We can do this. And then maybe we can and maybe we can't. But you need to think about where are you landing, because the energy is powerful. It's going to affect the horses. It's going to affect the people. Especially if you're looking at mental and emotional, it can kick people off their equilibrium. So you're looking at partnering with the land. You're also looking at partnering with the people, so matching people. So of course the horses could step forward and offer for you and say, this is what I'd like to do today. Your knowledge is imperative though. See, as a horse whisperer, if you come on my horse whispering classes, depending on what you're seeking, if I'm looking at building confidence in somebody truly lacking it, I'll give you a kind horse. If I'm looking at building confidence in somebody who's got the talent to become a trainer, they're going to get a challenging horse. So we match it. If we're looking at somebody actually with a huge ego, going, I've done this my whole life, and although I'm here, I'll show you a thing or two. I'll give them a Mustang. Okay? So there's a part of me that will feel the energy of the person, watch their body language, listen to their story, watch the horses to see who steps forward, but I'm also part of that matching. The matching of a coach would be to make the person, not break them. So we're here to make them. That means we can step back and we can support them. We're also there to interpret correctly. So that would mean when the horse is giving a piece of information that we interpret it correctly, not wrongly. So that's a key piece. Like if they're pushing you, why are they pushing you? Is it because you don't have a boundary? That's a horsemanship piece. But what else is it? What's it truly about? A lot of you have met my horse Excalibur. He coaches a few times a year. I never wanted him to be in it full time. He's a Spanish Mustang, but he does coach. And we put him in to a therapy situation where he was there. And he was doing the obstacle course at Liberty. So it's all out there. And X isn't that most forward for the obstacle course at Liberty. He's very opinionated, got 3 swirls in his forehead. Complex, opinionated. He's it. And the woman was a professional trainer. And it just felt right, so we matched him and her. And she's there, and he's not going to move. And he literally, it's horrible, but he came up, he chose this area, just here, if you step back up just a sec. He chose here, and if you don't mind me touching, he went here, and he pushed her, like that. And I watched it, and it was quite deliberate, just like that. And she got a little pissed with it, and he went up and he did it again, poked her. And I'm watching this going, this is interesting. And she said, I can't get him to move. And we just have long lines, because it's an extension of your arm. And she came back, if I were at home now, I'd pick up the whip and I'd show him. And I went, well, you're not at home, and you're not getting a whip. So she's looking at it going, well, he's not moving. He's being disrespectful, rude. And I'm thinking, he's in a therapy situation. I'm interested to see where he's going with this. So we continued with the session. He pushed her boundaries, he triggered, we continued. Later in the day, the therapist had the woman in her piece. We were teaming up. And as she's walking in the round pen sharing stories, she shares that she aborted a child of hers, that she had been adopted. And this was her only chance to have blood and flesh of hers, and she'd made a mistake. It was very touching, and she regretted it. She was there to realize that had happened. She didn't know it at first. Excalibur had gone up and pointed exactly where the issue was. He's not subtle, he's not kind. He didn't go there and breathe into her tummy going, I'm sorry, you're hurting. He went, there's your issue, deal with it. So you take a risk, because his style is cowgirl up, reveal your issue, be authentic, here it is, show the therapist, now let's speak about it. Probably, like I am, a little bit of if you have a problem, let's talk. Another horse truly would go up and share breath and begin to do energy healing here. You do need to know a little bit of your horse's style to know how they're going to adopt it, so you don't always take the risk. With me traveling, I don't know the styles. I have to trust the horses when they point out and how they're going to do it. So for him, coaching a few times a year, he handles it, literally shakes it off, walks on, he's fine. But if he did that daily or weekly, we would start to see if that's truly the job for him, if he likes that, and if it works for him. So this is how powerful it can be when we bring in the horses. And these are the considerations we're looking for as you move forward into your passion, or you're in your passion, and you're looking to partner with these horses. My hope was to have my DVD available to you when I initially put this up last year when we applied for the expo. It's a DVD I filmed in Connecticut because I kept on going around seeing these things where the horses weren't happy and they were questioning the true partnership. So at some point this spring, we get it out, and it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be scenic, and there's topics in there. And if I remember it correctly, I've called the DVD In Partnership with Horses. And the titles will be Partnering with the Language, so that you guys learn that language. Partnering in Training, Partnering with the Board of Directors, partnering with peers, partnering with people, i.e. clients, and truly understanding what's the partnering. It doesn't have to all be in the saddle. It can be on the ground. It can be sharing space with them, sitting and watching them. It can be grooming them. It could be hanging out with them, doing the love lessons of the energy healing. Could be sitting bareback with them, ground driving them, just being walked around with them, whatever that partnering might be, so that you could adjust. In fact, you could bring them out that paddock and see that he's shying away from the saddle and say, let's change it today. I know I had a great lesson plan for you. Let's change it, because it looks like he's not on board with that. Not everybody can have that flexibility. I understand that too. There's so many organizations sprouting up with this, from the PATH certified locations, EGALA certified locations. Some of you will have rules and regulations to go on. But what you can do with your own business is begin to see how the horses are responding. And you can adapt it and adjust to truly make that partnership happen, so that you become the best you can be and you bring out that full potential for that horse. Because after all, I think that's what we're in it for. We're looking for that love. We're looking for the unconditional love that they give often, and we're looking for those miracles of healing from people that are suicidal to literally stay on the planet, from people that have never spoken a word before, speaking when they're in the company of a horse, from people not walking to walking. These are the miracles the horses are doing, we're not. And in order to accept those miracles or to support the miracles, you are the voice of the horse, nobody else. You're the voice of that horse. So that's where you take the ownership. And if you have a board to answer to, because that seems to be a big thing too, you are the voice to the board. When they say it will cost this much, or we don't have this in the kitty, or do you understand this? I understand it fully. And when I partner with somebody, I'm authentic. And when I partner with them, I'm going to have their best interests at heart. So if we're going to be riding, we need those saddles. And we will manifest it. And those are the things that we're looking for, because they only have the voice through acting out. They only have the voice by their behavior. And then they'd be deemed dangerous or deemed uncooperative. How do people expect them to say how they're feeling if they cannot do that? How do they express the pain if they can't buck? How do they express not coming towards you if they're unhappy with the job you've given? They have to act out. They have to show you. And that's where you become the voice for the horse in order to partner correctly. Okay. No idea what time we're on. 5 minutes prior. I'm on the money. Okay, so any questions in the next 5 minutes that I can support you with on this topic? It's the first time I've done it. Wasn't sure how it's going to go. And I feel like you've got a lot to think about there and to walk out into the world and make that difference. It's really important, because I know these are miracles, so we don't want to change the miracles, but really important that we truly partner and we don't tell ourselves we are when we're not. That's my big thing when I enter these facilities. Are you really partnering? Because we can make it even better. Any questions before I close? So they're going to show an interest. She's asking, how do we move forward if they have shown interest? They may show interest in the children. They may show interest in healing. It's pretty cool when you do any horsemanship. I've been in classes, actually an oncologist student of mine. We walked into a paddock at Zuma's, and we defined what we were going to do, which was she was going to practice how to greet horses, back of the hand, and how different greetings looked like. A Mustang there had a different idea. As my student walked in there, this Mustang stepped up and gave her a 1-hour healing session out of the blue. This is an oncologist. She deals with death. She deals with cancer. This horse decided, we're not doing greetings today. In fact, you need a heart connection for 1 hour. The audience grew, all the students outside were watching, didn't video it because you never have that moment to do it. But the horse stepped up and it changed that woman's life and it changed the students' lives. So there will be places where you set foot on the land and you'll know it's the right place. So as soon as you begin to say, my horse is volunteering, or I think my horse wants to do this, start putting it out there. Start looking for that right place. You've got to put a step forward. You can't just go, okay, manifest it. You've got to step forward. Go looking at the facilities. See which one resonates with you. So how does it feel? How does it look? What are the people like there? Are the horses happy, or are they cooped up in stalls? And that would be one telltale sign. Are they out and about moving? Are they allowed to socialize? Huge one. Big on the East Coast. There's somehow a ban on socializing because they could injure themselves in the performance world. So we look at this thing of, are they out there having a life? Do they have time off? Do I feel like this would be a place that I want to be at? Do I feel happy? And then we can put it forward. And there'll be many programs where there's summer programs. People are looking for horses for summer programs that you say, let's see how this horse feels. They can always come home. You could also lease them out. They can come home. So those are things to be mindful of maybe they want to support somebody temporarily. And if they like it full time, for me, I like the idea when you allow them the chance to come home in the first right of refusal to get them home and back, so that they're not discarded from that therapeutic setting at 22 where they're too lame and now they've got nowhere to go. Look at bringing them home. They've served 2-3 times. Maybe they can retire with you guys. And then they can have that passion that they've had for a while, but they know they can come home. After all, when we use the word partner, aren't we saying we're family? Because we don't sell our family members or discard them when they're sick or ill. We help them. So partnering for us needs to be our inner circle, not our outside circle. We're saying my inner circle includes that partnering. I'm here for you. Okay, so those are things to be mindful of. I put a few flyers out here, and I put a sign-up sheet. If you're interested in the DVD, I'm pretty proud of it. All my DVDs, I wait till it's exactly how it needs to be. We've got phenomenal music on it, and it's actually, it fits the DVD, brings tears to my eyes, but it was sang by a beautiful country artist, and it's about listening. With the horse asking us to listen, it's a perfect fit. And we've got those chapters in there to help people to get started in the sense of let's do it right. Let's make sure we do this right so that we're taking care of them. All right? Thank you very much for your time.